everyone, welcome back to Beyond the Veil Tarot and Astrology. My name is Candice Marie. I'll be your astrologer today. Thank you guys for joining me. Happy Thursday. Hope your week is going well. This is going to be my long-awaited part 2 video for the Venus retrograde in Leo series that I've been doing. Yeah, I'm excited to talk about this. I intentionally waited to put this out primarily because I taught a webinar on this last month. But also I wanted to wait until the 20th of July when Venus and the Moon were in conjunction in the very degrees that we are going to see the retrograde take place in. I'm trying to be better about timing astrology videos, right? Go figure. So as you guys are watching some of this stuff, you're actually feeling some of the events so you can see it. Because I don't just like to use astrology to better understand myself and other people, but I like to talk to you guys about how to be aware of how the planets are communicating with us. So today, Venus and the Moon are in conjunction at 28 degrees of Leo. And in just a couple of days, on the 22nd, we're going to see Venus start her retrograde. So if you want more information on the shadow period, if you want all those dates and all that stuff, please check out either my first video that I put out. I'll plug it somewhere in the video or the description. Or consider buying my Venus Retrograde Cruel Summer webinar. It's on my website and you guys can check that out. It's over 3 hours long. I'll give you more information at the end of this video. Do yourself a favor, go watch this Sunday's Astro Weather. I take it through the 12 signs and I go more in depth on the July 2023 horoscopes that are on my channel. So I have lots of information about this transit that I've put out there for free in advance for those of you guys who like to hear about it. But for those of you guys who are wanting to do some extracurriculars, check out the webinar. All right, so essentially retrogrades, right? We review, revisit, rethink, rework, reorganize, all of the re's. So we deal with the past or we reevaluate past situations with a retrograde. Now Venus is going to be going retrograde in the fixed fire sign of Leo. She has been in shadow really since June. So some of the transits that we're going to be talking about today about the actual retrograde itself have already happened. So you may have seen some of these kind of things relating to Venus retrograde already start popping up in your life. We have a pre-shadow, a retrograde, and a post-shadow. So I'm going to take you guys through the retrograde as well as the post-shadow period, give you my hot takes. But as a reminder, yes, we deal with the past, exes come back, we deal with past drama, especially in Leo, and things do slow down. Now, the whole purpose of that is to turn inward and rework something, okay? Venus rules money, relationships, values, social patterns, needs, resources. These are all Venus-related things. Style as well, okay? So that's something else I want you guys to take into consideration. This will be affecting 12 to 28 degrees of Leo, Sun, Moon, or Rising the most. If you have a personal planet within those degrees, Venus is going to retrograde several times over that, which is not necessarily something to panic about. Venus is one of the more positive signs in astrology. So if you happen to have a natal Venus, a Mars, a Jupiter, a North Node, some of the more beneficial placements, it can actually be like an extended period of sweetness. And kind of going a little bit deeper into the themes of Venus. People who have like Saturn, Pluto, South Node, right, or you're experiencing squares, yes, that can be a little bit rockier. But there is a process to the retrograde. It's almost trying to kind of bring all of the stuff up that's keeping us for more love, better self-esteem, healthier finances, to kind of work out all the gunk so that way we can get on the right track with ourselves and other people. This will also be strongly affecting Taurus and Libra risings because you guys are ruled by Venus. So you guys are also, similar to Leo, a little bit more likely to kind of get hit with some of the retrograde shade. Be very mindful of, anything aesthetically. I see lots of comments with people being like, what about this and that? And I have surgery and I'm cutting my hair or I've invested in something. I can't answer those questions without looking at the whole chart, but if you have a specific question relating to the retrograde, check out my website. I offer reports that are delivered to you in your email, or you can book a one-on-one reading with me. I am booked until September, so while a lot of this stuff is going on, I'm not going to have availability, but you guys can catch me here on Friday nights during live readings. We do them by donation based, and we can get people who can come in and ask those questions. Equally the fixed signs. So if you are a Taurus, Leo, Scorpio, or Aquarius, you're going to feel this pinch because of the squares, especially if you have a sun, moon, or rising anywhere between 12 and 22 degrees, 28 degrees, because the retrograde will go 12 to 28. Before I get into the things to keep in mind, I want to read to you guys the Sabian symbol for 28 degrees of Leo, because that's where the retrograde is going to be taking place. And we round up because it's going to start at 28 degrees and change. So we're going to read 29. So those of you guys who have the Sabian symbol book, it's page 178. Leo 29, a mermaid. The keyword is in perpetuity. The theme is doing what comes naturally. The symbol speaks to the desire to self-fulfilling experience. The image of a mermaid alludes to lack of sophistication, ingenuousness, unschooled innocence. It also suggests purity and refusal to compromise the integrity of selfhood. The emphasis is the symbol of the feminine element or intuition, creativity, and emotion. At its highest, this represents delicate sensitivity to the soul's inner stirrings and a tendency to do what comes naturally. Watch for a lack of self-refinement or simple crudeness. The accent is on a desire for experience that will help you build self-confidence and find your place in the world. You may find yourself a little gullible today. The greatest advantage lies in following your natural instincts, trusting your intuition regardless of what others might be telling you. Guard against letting yourself be seduced by flattery or talked into something too quickly. Check things out before committing yourself. Stepping stones is eagerness, desire, natural instincts, determination, lack of sophistication, and gullibility. Okay. Obviously 29 degrees, right? 28 and change. We're getting into the later degrees of Leo. So this is when that energy is very fixed and very strong. Leo is, a solar-based sign. So it is masculine, it's loud, it's proud, it's creative, it's warm. It's very generous. It's very, very star-studded, right? Especially those last degrees. I think some things to keep in mind that I would be aware of is that big things happen when planets station. So when they're getting ready to retrograde or when they're going direct, oftentimes we can see the effects of the retrograde itself make major headlines. And in the background, I've said all along, like Venus really is the star of this summer. Like in so many ways, she's making so many aspects to outer planets and also to the nodes that it's going to be hard to miss some of these Venus-related things that are going to be taking place all summer long. She is also connected very much to this South Node, which has just recently entered into Libra. So we are observing, we're becoming aware, we're kind of picking apart and deciding, what we want to keep and what we're willing to kind of release or let go of. When it comes to relationship themes, imbalances, anything in regards to not getting what we need and clearing, I think, a lot of karma in relationships. And I think a lot of astrologers agree that we deal with some karmic situations when retrogrades happen because we're actually needing to go back and correct something or reflect on something. So we're kind of doubling down with a Venus retrograde where you hear that there's lots of challenges in relationships in general because while Venus is retrograde, she is not visible. So it's harder to find like the sweetness, it's harder to find the relationship connection. And in the sign of Leo, there's definitely a lot of drama. So that's part of why we're going to see some of this uptick in kind of feeling like it's hard to get along or it's hard to get that itch scratched or, to kind of satisfy the sweet tooth. Venus is also strongly connected to both Jupiter and Uranus in Taurus. She is the dispositor. So because those two planets are in a Venusian sign, they are feeding off of each other. So while Jupiter is making things bigger, right, higher interest rates, more inflation, more expensive food, cost of living, rents going up, price of land going up, all of these earthly things, that's all as a result of Venus. And then throughout this particular transit, we've already seen in the pre-shadow, Venus has formed several squares while she was coming into the shadow with these two planets. Now, I'll talk a little bit about what that means in just a second. Some of you guys are already aware. I talked about it in the pre-shadow video, but I know we have some people who are just tuning in for the first time. Keep in the back of your mind that Leo rules entertainers, right? Performers, children, lovers, playmates. It's about taking risks. It's about falling in love. It's also about younger people. So it can also be connected to birth and life. Where Cancer is more the womb, Leo is where you take your first breath, right? It's like the first roar that we have on this planet. And there's going to be a number of aspects that are just, in my mind, they're just like so, so mind-boggling. So outside of the South Node connection and the sextile that Venus will be making several times throughout this transit, that means that she's also forming a trine to the North Node in Aries. So where Libra is very Venusian and it's we, Aries is me, I am, I need, I'm doing, I'm creating, I'm initiating. And really, I think the theme with this is to love thyself. So much of the retrograde is about getting out of this need to seek attention or fulfillment or validation for other people. There is like a sense of realizing that you can't buy love, right? You just can't. And I think a lot of that is the squares to the planets in Taurus, which can represent material things. But it's also going to be people having some huge shifts in regards to their personal values. So when we see fire trines taking place, there's going to be a lot of action. People are going to feel very inspired. They're going to feel very passionate, very driven, going after what it is they want, value, and love. So in that sense, it can be really great in working on the relationship that you have with yourself, because it's only then when we're 100%, we can better meet other people, right? We're also going to notice that Venus is going to be in conjunct or quincunx Pluto, which is like an agitating aspect, to be really honest with you. Now, thankfully, we're actually going to see Venus be the focal point of a yod. So we have Pluto, which is representing a reevaluation of power and control, Neptune, which is about what we're not seeing, and it has everything to do with what is secretive or spiritual or hidden from us. And we've got Venus that quincunx or in conjunct both of these placements, creating a yod, also known as a finger of fate. Essentially, she is saying in the skies like, hey, we need to review this. We need to bring this back up. We need to look at the past and see where some of these, Venus or Leo related characters are shining a light, because it's solar, on some of the corruption, some of the things that are going on in the world that is not allowing us to really focus on happiness, joy, life, innocence, creativity, and love, right? Something my mentor always said to me is like, essentially we focus and really show our energy in two different ways, or our emotions. It's just love or it's fear. Anything outside of that is just a derivative of the two. So if it's not love, it's going to fall in the other category. And I kind of see that as connections to Pluto. So Pluto in its retrograde and in the late degrees of Capricorn is kind of like this death rattle, right? There's like this sense of like power structures in the world and governments and leaders and big business are really doing everything they can to just really have a grip on control right now. Not wanting people to experience joy, not wanting people to be able to have freedom and happiness and creativity, all these Leo related things. Capricorn is naturally 6 signs away from Leo, so it does represent illness, it does represent accidents, it does represent, in some cases, just like laborious, things. So it can be also, kind of referencing where younger people right now are really, really feeling the heaviness of being optimistic and feeling like there is hope for the future. And I think that's going to come up throughout the summer. But the yod in itself is actually a very positive thing, because I feel like it's going to be the artists, the performers, the creatives, the children who are going to step up and say, this has to stop. We can't continue to keep doing this. In your life, though, you want to look at where Leo is in your chart and know that through this Venus retrograde, it's trying to actually almost like completely erase and get rid of some of Pluto's kind of like, evil underlord type doings in your life at this moment. Now, Pluto is in a square with the nodes. We're also seeing, as the next couple of days set up, the sun is coming into an opposition with Pluto. So we're really being faced with, and we're really feeling challenges revolving around home and security. Cancer can be about protecting, nurturing, caring, and Leo can be about younger people. So you're going to hear lots of talk revolving around what are we doing as a whole, whether it's your family, your community, your country, to be protecting and providing for and guiding younger individuals. This is not limited to any one particular country. I think we're going to see this across the board. In many ways, it's already kind of being done. But I think it's going to be very loud right around the time that Venus is starting her retrograde, because the sun is directly correlated with this Venus retrograde, because the sun rules Venus. So what we're going to be seeing is right at the tail end of Cancer season, the Sun-Pluto opposition is going to be exposing crime, darker things, the underworld, kind of shining a flashlight on it and being like, this is what these people at the top are doing. And we need to really pay attention to what either Hollywood or creatives or what younger people are really saying. And I think it's going to give everybody an opportunity to just really kind of realize how far the rabbit hole goes when it comes to this intermingling, I think, of some of the financial crimes, the sexual allegations and other things that are going on in the world right now, and how it's all kind of interconnected. So we'll see. Just know that with Pluto square the nodes, it's very likely that, we are aware that things are uncomfortable and that things have to change. And there are certain powers at B that do not want to give up that power. They do not want to see some of these things come out, because it's ultimately going to, I think, directly connect higher ranking groups in society. Capricorn can be people associated with the government, but it can also be big business, as well as the aspects that it's making to Neptune. I do feel like it can be about things that are kind of shadowy and hidden, but it can also be things that are connected to private groups. It can also be relating to prisons, foreign countries, immigration, and also like organized religions can also be one of those groups that are also very much involved in what's going on. Know that the degree that Venus is retrograding at as well is going to be conjunct Regulus. So this is a degree that deals with regal people, kings and queens, royal celebrities, very well known and high-ranking individuals. Then we'll talk about one of them that's kind of getting brought up right now with this retrograde shadow in just a minute. And we will have two other asteroid goddesses that are in the mix in the midst of this Venus retrograde, which is interesting. One, which is Lilith, also known as like that raw feminine spirit. She can be very sexual, but she can also be about liberation and freedom and equality, as well as Juno, which is about partnerships and relationships, marriage and devotion. So we kind of have like the mother or the wife and the other woman that's getting in the mix with Venus. And so we may find that 3 is a crowd. Likely there's going to be some scandal. We are going to be finding out that there is going to be some issues potentially in relationships or in Hollywood that involve infidelity or a third person. And then finally, when Venus leaves Leo and moves into Virgo in the fall, closer to October, she's going to move into a sign that is Mercury ruled. She is in her fall in Virgo, which means she doesn't function as well. Typically, this can be a sign that has challenges revolving around, consistent commitment, and it's about kind of maybe being a little bit more particular in relationships, or realizing that certain relationships are not ultimately healthy for us, and she will face an opposition to Saturn. So likely what will happen for a lot of individuals is that if you are already going through some relationship challenges, it may be a bit of like a back and forth that's happening really until you get to the early October period. It can also be that you're going back and forth with making changes to a creative project, making changes also with your relationship with a child, You might be going back and forth with contemplating, if you're going to have a side hustle or a business, or if you're going to make an investment, before ultimately making a decision that actually it might not be the right time, or this relationship isn't healthy for me, it's not good. And some people may realize that that wrestling back and forth all summer leads to the inevitable anyway. I don't say this to be negative. I just want to let you guys know that you can save yourself a lot of trouble by being aware that this retrograde is coming and not allowing yourself to fall into some of the trappings of a retrograde, like texting your ex and starting a bunch of drama, or reconnecting with somebody knowing that they've got another person, or maybe just going back to relationships or staying in the wrong relationship because you want attention, validation, or security, right? So that's going to be some of the themes that we're going to see throughout this particular retrograde phase. I want to take you guys now through the retrograde itself, and it will be starting on July 22nd, 2023. So just a couple days, and it will go direct on September 3rd, 2023. So 40 days, 40 nights of Venus doing her thing, going to the underworld, coming back and being reborn, and having a sense of new awareness and like knowing what it is that she actually needs when it comes to relationships. So the retrograde starts on the 22nd. And when the retrograde begins, it's going to be in conjunction to Lilith. Here we go. Okay, so this will be the PM hours on the 22nd. And a lot of people have asked in the videos about Lilith. She moves very erratically, so you'll see her go in and out of Leo a couple different times throughout this transit. And she will make several conjunctions, but generally she needs to be activated by other planets. So today, as you guys are watching this, Venus and Lilith are nearby with the moon. So you want to kind of take a look at what's coming up where you're feeling like you need freedom, or maybe you're feeling a little bit sexier than usual. And really the next couple of days as Venus is stationing is when I think we're likely to see some pretty significant Venus-related events. Now, something else I didn't really talk about too much is the fact that Venus does have connections to the stock market in this sign. Leo is about gambling and speculation and anything revolving around, taking chances. So if that's something you're doing or gambling, between the retrograde and the fact that it's going to square off with Jupiter and Uranus several times, you might see a bit of like a back and forth where you're winning some and then you lose it and then you come back and then you kind of lose it all. So be very careful and cautious with trading, because I think we're going to see that there is going to be several pumps where things go up, and then ultimately as we're getting into the fall, we may see a bit of a breakdown. But this is when the retrograde begins. But I don't really feel like it has to necessarily be this day. I think it's been really building up for the better part of like the last week or so, in my opinion. And then we're going to see the next aspect on the 28th, where you will see another Venus-Lilith conjunction. So that's going to be happening again, where Venus is now starting her retrograde. Remember, throughout the beginning of the retrograde, Venus is in a trine to the North Node. So whatever drama or passions or issues that are coming up in relationships, it's about accountability. Taking accountability for our happiness, our joy. I think the North Node in Aries is so much about that. It's about kind of getting out of our own way and realizing where a relationship's not going to save us, right? It doesn't matter if it's like a trust fund or like a wealthy spouse. Like, you never know when those things could run out. So there is a need to be really focusing on, providing for ourselves, showing up for ourselves, doing the work for ourselves. And it's in a very action kind of way because it's taking place in fire signs. So while the Venus-Lilith conjunction is representing where there may be temptation, the trines to the North Node is also going to be about, well, do I really want that, or am I just being tempted? And, am I acting impulsively? North Node in Aries is very impulsive, and I do think that when we see some other aspects that are going to be taking place with other fire placements, you can see that there can be this feeling of being like, is the grass greener, or am I going to kind of like take that risk, or am I going to kind of get greedy with something, especially on the 28th because the moon is going to be in Sagittarius, so watch for that. And then we're going to have on the 9th of August, this will be the second Venus square Uranus. Okay, so we originally had this, you know, the last month or two where we had that square. Essentially, Uranus and Taurus is not comfortable, right? Taurus wants to be just kind of chilling and not feeling like it's being disrupted. So when Venus squares Uranus, it's saying, no, we're putting pressure on the system. Uranus and Taurus can be about how, you know, the financial systems are under pressure. It can be about the banks that are under pressure. It can be about significant changes going on with resources and money. I definitely think that that's going to be a theme, which reminds me, there's a chart that I want to pull up before we finish. I want to show you guys something. But yeah, it's like that's when we're feeling that pressure financially. If you guys remember when the retrograde shadow started, first Venus squared with Jupiter. So there was that tendency to overindulge, overspend, overdo it, right? With the sweets or the love or the relationship stuff. And then we came into the square with Uranus where it was just like, oh, okay, it was a little dissettling. Something about Venus's retrograde is about figuring out what we love, what we are passionate about, what we enjoy doing, whether it's hobbies or you know, just having fun or, you know, getting back into the swing of dating again or feeling romantic. So I could see for some people that the Venus-Uranus square is kind of like, oh, this is different, but I think I kind of like it, especially the Venus retrograde. It's like going back and trying something new. The sign of Taurus can be also about personal style. The second house is about personal style in some situations. So I could see some people that are like, oh, we're kind of seeing some, you know, patterns that are playing out from the past. Like, I like it. I like some of this like grunge style or other things that are coming back up from the 90s. We saw some similar squares actually, some Saturn in Taurus, and I believe it was Uranus in Aquarius in the 90s when we had all the jellies and the butterfly clips and all that stuff that was going on when I was a kid. And it's made a bit of a comeback, so I think that we might kind of see some of that. There's definitely be some style changes that are going to take place. But I could also see, you know, people feeling a little restless and needing to make a change in relationships. And so remember that retrogrades oftentimes we're not functioning at full capabilities, right? Venus is saying like, I want to change this, but we might find out that acting too abruptly or changing relationships too quickly or changing things financially too quickly can have some really challenging results, right? So we don't want to move too quickly. I also think that we're going to see a lot of like botched, I've said, haircuts, dye jobs, issues also revolving around cosmetic surgery. You know, I think of like Venus square Jupiter is like, yes, you know, make my chest bigger, make my butt bigger. And then the squares to Uranus is like, once you're feeling different in your body, there can be some issues with like almost like body dysmorphia of like, it's changed so quickly and I can't see it and I'm seeing an older version of myself and I thought I wanted this and I was gonna love this and then you don't. Not that there's anything wrong with cosmetic procedures. If that's what you guys want to do that makes you feel better, all the more power to you. But these are not the transits to do that. These are not the transits to rip all your hair out and put in really long extensions, right, Leo? Thinking, oh, if I go and I, buy that, fancy hairstyle or that big watch or that, expensive piece of clothing, I'm going to feel good. And what some of us might realize is that we're breaking the bank on physical things, thinking it's going to make us feel better, but money can't buy you love, both on a personal level as well as a relationship level. So be very careful with that particular square. I've heard it a million different times where during a retrograde, somebody will go in and gut their closet and buy a bunch of stuff. And then 2 weeks later, they realize like, I hate these patterns and I don't like this color. And I don't know why I let that sales associate talk me into buying this stuff. Or wallpapering, their entire house with this like funky pattern or bright color and then realizing like, this is not my style. So the impulses to want to change things up in relationships, in style, in resources, it's going to be very strong, right? And some of us might be feeling tempted to kind of make that change, but left kind of feeling disappointed and unfulfilled. Now, after the 9th of August, we're going to see on the 13th where the Venus Cazimi takes place. And this will be the new Venus star point. So this is when Venus is in conjunction to the sun. It's going to happen very early in the morning on the 13th, but this will be taking place at 20 degrees of Leo. So check your chart. Do you have anything there? If you do, it might be pretty important and pretty prominent as Venus moves into a superior position in front of the sun, relaying a gift to the king. Still in a square to Uranus. We're feeling that. Oof. The good news is this is the halfway point through the retrograde. So it does start to kind of physically now shine a light and show us this is what we needed to work through, or this is what was meant to come back to you. You know, people say like, okay, if you set it free, you know, if it comes back to you, it's like meant to be. Like, that's kind of how you want to treat this whole process, because the more that you're willing to actually set things free, whatever is meant to arrive will likely arrive somewhere around this time. It can bleed a little bit into the new moon in Leo, but yeah, I mean, what can I say about this? I mean, you've got, you know, Venus that's still in a square to Jupiter and Uranus. I think we're going to see lots of shocks and surprises in Hollywood, and lots of shocks and surprises also in regards to the financial system. We're coming into a balsamic moon in this particular phase, so it's getting really dark right before we have like a reset, and we'll have a Leo new moon featuring Lilith as well as Venus retrograde. So a lot of us are going to be really reevaluating, why have I been so afraid to be myself, to show my true talents, to be authentic, to put myself out there? So what if other people don't like me? So what if it affects my bottom line? I think that's the one thing I've really appreciated about the shadow that's taken place over the last month or two, is that I've seen a number of people who are, you know, performers or actors or artists who have basically kind of cut ties with certain organizations or certain media outlets. I've seen it a lot with journalists that are just kind of like, screw it, I don't want to get paid to, you know, put out some false narrative. I don't want to continue to be taking, you know, money to promote products that may not necessarily be healthy or may not necessarily be as valuable as what I'm being told to kind of parrot, you know, on the web or on TV. And so I think that there can be some scandals revolving around who's actually taking payments because of the squares to Taurus, and, you know, where there has been some incentive to coerce, whether it's individuals or the masses, to physically change or alter their body, to take certain supplements or medications, and the effects that it's having potentially on younger people. Now, Leo rules the back, but it also is connected to the heart. So in the back of my mind, I'm looking at this going, are we going to learn something new about heart health and younger people, particularly children? Are we going to see a really significant situation happen where there is a loss of a significant star or well-known person? This Cazimi is taking place at 20 degrees, so that's a Scorpio degree. Unfortunately, I do think it is going to be the loss of somebody who is a well-known performer as a result of like either a heart issue, or there can be, with that aspect, some news coming out in regards to their children or some kind of scandal involving younger people. But that is the star point that's starting. And what's interesting is that also we see this trine taking place to Chiron. So it does kind of represent, you know, maybe there's news that's coming out that, you know, somebody's going through something, but it's making them stronger as an individual, or they're finally feeling that they need to, you know, share some kind of information with the masses, and they're willing to kind of put themselves out there and potentially affect their public reputation and put their reputation on the line. All right, so then after the 13th, we take this to the 16th, where we have the new moon that's going to be in Leo. And it looks like that new moon is going to be around 23 degrees, so a Uranian degree. Venus is still retrograde. Look at this stellium in Leo. Lilith is conjunct the sun and moon, and that is exactly in a square with very few minutes to Uranus, and Uranus hits 23, sun and moon hit 23. That's going to be pretty wild. New moons obviously are positive. There's new intentions that are being set. We happen to have a new moon that involves the sun, which is both the dispositor of the moon as well as Venus. And likely there is probably some stuff that's going to be taking place from this particular lunar cycle up to the full moon and then the next new moon that's just really blowing everything out of the water and really showing where there's going to be that scandal, or there's going to be that information that's kind of breaking loose that is going to be radically changing or transforming something about the financial systems or about the banks. I'll give you guys my list in a second, but I definitely think it's going to do with the future of money, and whether or not the US dollar is going to continue to be like the top dog, or if there's going to be other competing nations that are potentially throwing their hat in the ring to create a new currency that may be backed by gold. All right, so then on the 17th, this is when Venus will begin to reemerge as the morning star. So even though the retrograde period is still continuing, in theory, it gets a little bit easier from here. And then on the 21st, we're going to have the second Venus-Jupiter square. So this will be at 15 degrees. So where the other one with Uranus was at an Aquarian degree, 23, which is shocking, surprising, something suddenly happens, this is now going to be a Gemini degree. So it's about news, it's about conversations, communication, information coming out. Venus is connected to Libra, and the Libra moon will be connecting to the South Node, square Pluto. Wow. So Pluto's going to be the focal point, basically, of this square, and being very affected with the Venus square Jupiter, with relationship disharmony, letting things go, breaking apart contracts, breaking things down and realizing this is not working. I can't work with this person anymore. And you're going to see a lot of people in business or in media or in the industry that are going to go, I'm distancing myself from this person. I've heard a lot of individuals, a lot of clients that have been like, I found out that my partner was doing something that was, essentially betraying me, or it was illegal. I had to leave the relationship. I found out my employer was, lying about things and not being honest, and, out of integrity, I had to quit the job. We're going to hear a lot about this stuff. And I think a lot of people are going to start realizing that it does not make sense to slap on a happy face and play nice and align with people just because it's going to get us somewhere, that we can't be paid off, we can't be bought, and that it really isn't going to behoove us on an emotional or on a spiritual level to continue to partner with individuals that are not living in integrity. And so I think this is going to come up very, very strongly, especially as the sun is crossing the degree that Venus started the retrograde at on this particular day. So this is the second Jupiter square from Venus. And then finally, we are going to see on the 3rd of September, Venus will end her retrograde at 12 degrees. Now, here what else is interesting. When Venus is coming, to that degree where she's going to station, she's still very much connected to the sun. So the sun will have gone through an opposition to Saturn. The sun is experiencing a conjunction to Mercury. It's almost as if some of the truth, some of the facts, some of the information isn't truly fully coming out until the September period. So we'll have to see what happens with that as well. No coincidence that at the same time, we're also going to be seeing a North Node moon in Aries conjunction. So while all of this stuff is kind of stationing, we're realizing like we have to be kind of making decisions for ourselves and going our own way, ruled by Mars. And we'll see that the moon will have come into an opposition with Mars. So really breaking a point apart from relationships and partnerships that are not serving our highest good or allowing us to love and honor ourselves. And then obviously Venus will be direct at 12 degrees. So technically the retrograde is over, come the, later day hours of the 3rd going into the 4th. But keep in mind that Venus is still going to go through another square to Jupiter, another square to Uranus, and then is going to oppose, right? It's going to oppose Saturn. So it's almost just as wild after the fact as it is like during the retrograde, as crazy as it sounds. I'm really watching when the Sun Cazimi takes place during the Mercury retrograde on the 6th, because the Sun is connected. Likely we are going to hear some, contradicting information on media and how media Legacy media is like spinning some of the things that are potentially coming out. Well, what's going on? Mercury retrograde in Virgo conjunct the sun. It can be, information revolving around job reports. It can also be the service industry. It could also be health. Venus deals with the nerves. Not a lot of people realize that. And I think something we're going to be hearing more and more about is like nervous system issues, how that's affecting, our bodies, how that's putting pressure also on our brains. And we're going to see either information that is starting to come out where we're having more factual data, especially with some of the trines that'll be taking place to Jupiter and Uranus, and hearing more, I think, from medical professionals that have been silenced, and them having physical information, samples, and things that they're wanting to kind of come out with, especially relating to, I think, heart health, dietary stuff, medications. Then we move to the, let's see, yeah, so then we move to the 8th. And on the 8th, we're going to have Venus conjunct Juno. I like this transit. I call this a Cinderella transit. I'd be lying if I said I haven't seen in my personal life and in my client's life Venus retrogrades that definitely served a higher purpose. Obviously, you're going to hear people say Venus retrograde, connecting with your soulmate, connecting with true love, because Venus rules that in Leo. But I keep thinking about how Venus will make this conjunction with Juno, and it's about actually connecting with our soulmate. But what if your soulmate is actually yourself? What if your soulmate is a pet, it's a best friend, it's somebody at work, it's a sibling? It doesn't necessarily need to be romantic, although Leo is romantic. I do think it's about kind of realizing like you are your, the relationship with yourself is like the number one most important thing. And I think a lot of people are going to be realizing that throughout this transit. However, if you happen to have any personal placements right around 12 degrees of Leo, this can be an extra romantic transit where Venus is now out of her retrograde, conjunct Juno, and maybe, just maybe, certain individuals are going through breakups or static because they're meant to meet or be with other people. Come later in the fall, I definitely think that we're going to see a lot of that as planets are dancing on the South Node. So it can feel like there's drama all summer, finding a clear relationship, people are really struggling and kind of building themselves back, only to realize that the universe was rerouting them so they could find something better. But I think ultimately it's going to start with yourself. Then on the 10th, we're going to see Venus and Juno conjunct again. So it's going to continue to conjunct. And then on the 16th of September, we're going to see the third Venus-Jupiter square. So this is the overdoing it aspect. It'll be at 15 degrees. So that can be overdoing it in terms of, oh, is there too many options, too many people, too much spending, too much, sweetness? No coincidence that once again, the moon is in Libra when we have this square. So it's picking up the energy of Venus overdoing it. And Moon and Mars, I think, can be about conflict, but it can also be about passion. It can also be about, really like connecting with another person and feeling kind of sexy because you're getting those sextiles to Venus. But I can't help but notice the opposition to Chiron. So where there's conflicts in relationship because of personal wounds that we need to heal. Then on the 27th of September, we're going to see Venus conjunct Juno again. So a lot of Venus-Juno transits. And that'll be at 21, conjunct the same degrees as where we saw the Cazimi. So we might start to see in September why certain things fell apart, because certain things needed to come together. I love that trine also to the North Node and a sextile to Mars. We like to see Mars and Venus in aspect to each other that's harmonious, because then we have the North Node ruler and the South Node ruler kind of working side by side. So obviously if you have anything around 21 degrees of Leo, that's something you want to watch for. And then on the 28th, we're going to see the third Venus-Uranus square, and that'll be taking place at 22 degrees. That'll kind of go into the 29th. So that's where we see more fluctuation. I like this, I don't like this, I've changed this, now this is what I'm doing type of vibe. I think we're going to see some people separate in relationships and then suddenly jump into new relationships. Ultimately, that's kind of the feeling that I'm getting with some of the Juno-Uranus aspects. Just having Juno in square to, Uranus makes me feel like we're questioning the traditional values of marriage. And some people are going to go, well, it's not for me. North Node's in Aries. See you later. I want to do my thing. While other people are going to be saying, no, actually, relationship and partnership makes me a better person. It holds me accountable. It makes me work on myself. And whether that's working with a spouse or a romantic partner, a business partner, a counselor, Venus teaches us that there is purpose for, having some kind of support from another person and appreciating and valuing those one-on-one relationships, even if they're not romantic. But I have a feeling that with Mars, coming into conjunction with the South Node, some of us are going to be realizing there are some relationships worth fighting for. And some of us are going to realize that we're fighting for relationships where our spouse, our partner, are not really making the connection and they're not doing the work. So we can get frustrated going, I'm working on myself. What are you doing? How are you showing up? And so that's also kind of the trappings of the South Node Mars in Libra, is we're cutting and releasing karma revolving around anger and pain and frustration that we're kind of throwing at our partners. I think a lot of this comes to like inner child issues. I could definitely see like a lot of tantrums with Venus in Leo and the squares to Uranus and unresolved, emotional issues that go back to our childhood in some cases. And then on the 1st of October, we're going to see Venus trine the North Node in Aries again. Okay, that's going to be around 23, 24 degrees, which means also she is sextiling the South Node and Mars. So they're in good harmonious aspect to each other. I like it. We are actively, touching on where we're going in the future and releasing the past. And maybe this can be a lot of like making up. It's like, okay, we've had our issues, but like those issues that came up, we really needed to work through. And some people may realize that it makes their relationship stronger. Then we're going to have on the 3rd another Yod. So Venus will be coming back into that Yod with Neptune and Pluto. So very similar as to right now as that is setting up, and we're realizing like we have to focus more on being in a heart-centered space. And Venus is love, so it's about love leading the way, and that in this case it's bold and it's proud, especially when it comes to talking about or sharing or creating. And then on the 5th, we're going to see another Lilith conjunction, and this is where things get kind of wild, you guys. Now we've got Venus and Juno and Lilith very close to each other, right? And so I think in some ways this can be like in relationships, how do we maintain the fire? How do we maintain the spice? Juno was known for being married to Jupiter. He was a bit of like a philanderer, and he definitely liked his ladies. But Juno stayed with him, even though he, continued to cheat on her and have, relationships with other goddesses and kind of children outside of their marriage. And so when I look at Venus and Juno, it's the devotion and the commitment and the love, and that keeping the romance alive, the fun, the creativity alive. Also, it can be about families and relationships and like how children can help be binding in certain relationships. And then Lilith can be finding a way to balance also. But we need that spice. We need to keep the flame alive. We need to continue to stay connected. And so even though that's a difficult aspect, the sextile to the South Node, some people may find themselves in situations where they're basically saying to their partners, if they know that there's other people, like it's me or it's her, or it's me or it's him, what's it going to be? And not wanting to play the back and forth game, which can kind of feel like a bit of a pissing match, honestly, with Venus square Uranus, which is like, I can do it better, I can do it bigger, look at this. But I think, if you're confident, you don't have to be loud. And sometimes we miss that mark, especially when we see planets in Leo and planets that are squaring off with each other, because the fixed signs are going to keep kind of pushing each other. So I could definitely see some people who are feeling like they're competing with other people for partners' attention, and having lots of issues and insecurities revolving around outside people who can kind of be interfering with relationships. But at the end of the day, obviously it's very complex, right? It's like if you've got a situation where people are not being faithful, there's probably problems going on both sides. However, clearly, this whole perspective of, well, you forgive your partner and you work through it because they made a mistake. I think some people are going to look at this and they're going to go, no, there was no mistake. You made that decision, and now, you've made your bed, now lie in it. And Venus is going to keep trining the North Node, which is basically saying, like, I can't hurt myself and continue to stay in these situations because it's not best for me. And it might take a little bit of back and forth, but some people might really finally break out of like trauma drama patterns in relationships. And then finally on the 9th of October, Venus will move into Virgo. So like I said, she's in her fall. And she's pretty much immediately, the 9th, the 10th, the 11th, met with an opposition to Saturn, okay? So we've got the South Node ruler, Venus, in a sign ruled by Mercury. Mercury is in opposition to Chiron in the North Node. There's a lot of indecisiveness in Libra. There's a lot of like kind of going, this isn't working. Maybe I'm losing myself in this relationship. I'm giving too much. I'm being too understanding. Planets conjunct the South Node, Mars square Pluto. And then what you guys are going to see is as Venus and the Moon come into conjunction and oppose Saturn, we see Mars hitting 29 degrees of Libra. Now you guys remember in April we had a 29-degree solar eclipse in Aries. Now we've got Mars in the solar position, in the opposite position of that solar eclipse. And Mars also does not perform well in Libra. Sun in Libra, Mars in Libra, planets on the South Node, dark moon. Mark your calendars, the 8th, 9th, 10th, 11th of October. That's really kind of like, at that point you might just feel like you're just hitting your head against a wall. That's like, I have no other choice. I've been left with no other option but to just nix this thing. I'm not making that investment. I'm leaving the relationship. That's it. I no longer can continue doing this. And ultimately, I think that there's a lot of support. When Venus gets out of that opposition with Saturn, she'll eventually come into a trine with Jupiter and Uranus, and we can start making those physical changes. But my point is that if you already know what you're kind of going back and forth with, you can save yourself a whole lot of time and just being aware that there is going to be this pattern of the retrograde kind of unfolding over the next couple of months. Now, I'm sure many of you guys want to know what to do and not to do. And my number one to do is, if you don't know, ask an astrologer. That's what we're here for. A lot of people think that we just make videos on the internet and, talk about horoscopes. And yes, there are a lot of astrologers that do that. I'm a full-time working astrologer, so I'm creating content full-time. I see clients full-time. I do not have a real muggle job, unfortunately. I kind of left that behind about 8 or 9 years ago. And so I have clients that will come to me and they'll say, well, I'm thinking about getting a divorce, or I'm thinking about launching a business, or I'm thinking about cutting my hair. You can come to astrologers and ask us about appropriate timing so you can have things kind of go a little bit better. So number one, if you don't know, ask someone and make sure that you do your due diligence to find an astrologer who's going to give you information. They need to have, obviously either reviews, or they need to have a good recommendation. You want to also know that they are thoroughly trained and they know what they're doing. Try not to make any permanent or long-lasting changes to your appearance. Leo is the mane, so it can be about the hair. We may also find that there are themes revolving around, are we settling for less? Okay? If you're starting to feel like that, you don't want to settle for less. We don't formalize relationships. The retrograde is going to take a little bit longer. So some people might be thinking about taking the next steps, like moving in together, getting engaged, getting married, or separating. So we don't want to formalize or definitively decide that we're leaving relationships until we've seen some of this stuff shake out. Watch for splurge purchases, going over the top, spending money on jewelry or on vacations or gambling or art. These things likely are going to be very expensive. You're going to see the price go up and then the price go down, and then you might be left feeling very unfulfilled. In particular, I think you might see this with art as well as, some jewelry related things that this will kind of go up and down with. And be wary of celebrity endorsements, because you might be finding that there are some patterns or brands or trends that are being endorsed by celebrities that look really good, and then you buy it and you realize you spent a lot of money on a pair of shoes or on some kind of brand name thing or some outfit or cosmetics, and you're like, I'm not thrilled with this. So those are my do nots, right? For some people who have a natal Venus in retrograde, you guys are kind of playing with home field advantage. I know there was like a retrograde, I think in 1983. And we also had one in 2005, I want to say. But more recently, if you guys saw my other video, 2015 and 2007, okay? Those are the last 2 years that we had Venus go retrograde in the sign of Leo. So you can go back and look at what may have happened at those times. There were lots of outer planet conjunctions that were associated with that. I think one was a Jupiter, one was a Saturn. So it's a little bit of a different flavor. And to be honest with you, like, I'm not mad at some of the aspects that Venus is making. A trine to the north node, a sextile to the south node, ain't all that bad. What do we do though during a retrograde? Obviously, you have to take into consideration which house the retrograde is going through, because this is the area of life that's going to be most affected by the retrograde itself. And a retrograde over a natal planet or a node is obviously very important, as are the angles. What to do? Get creative, right? Spend some time in the sun, focus on personal fulfillment, practice radical self-love, work on your personal talents, clear up old blockages in love or issues revolving around self-esteem. Heal the inner child, and make playtime a priority. These are the things that we want to do. And take your time, because Venus retrograde is about taking that extended period of time to enjoy that area of your life a little bit more. As a reminder, retrogrades, right, there's a process. So generally the planet will retrograde over degrees, make those aspects several times. This allows you to bring awareness to the lessons of the retrograde and give you time to work through it. So oftentimes if we rush things, we have to go back over it. So with matters of the heart, finances, or beauty, take your time. The first transit during the pre-shadow, which we've had, is to bring awareness. The second time it goes over something or makes an aspect is to allow you to review and reevaluate. And then the third time, when it's direct, is finishing up the process, which is why we're going to see delays in relationships, delays in finances, delays in some cases in happiness until we get out of this retrograde shadow. All right. So I just want to finish up by talking to you guys about some things that I'm noticing during this Venus retrograde period. I'm of the frame of mind that, planets archetypally are trying to connect with us in real life, right? I always laugh when it's like Mercury retrograde and, like an old email pops up that I couldn't find, or I get some message on a license plate, right? Or Pluto goes retrograde and, there's some like big secret that is exposed. These are the planets communicating with us. This is really how you develop a relationship with your astrological practice, not just applying it, listening to your horoscope, but being aware of what's going on and going, oh, okay, I see you. So these are some ways that I feel like I've gotten some contact, or I've had some kind of taps from Venus. And I'm going to start with the most important ones, and I'm going to work my way down because I do have a list. First and foremost, those of you guys who have not either seen The Sound of Freedom, or if you're not aware of what that movie is about, please check it out. There are lots of companies that are donating tickets to make it possible for you to go and see it. Although there's some talk and speculation about issues revolving around major movie theaters and way too many coincidences online where they are intentionally, it would so seem, creating a lot of really disruptive environments where people are not fully sitting and being able to see the movie. But The Sound of Freedom is a movie that is based off of the issue that's going on in the world revolving around child trafficking. The mainstream media is trashing it. You're hearing all kinds of stuff talking about how it's connected to conspiracy groups, talking about how it's fake. And it's really unfortunate because this is a project that has been shelved for a period of time. The Sound of Freedom basically follows an agent that was working for the US government into a series of raids where he was becoming aware that there were major issues in foreign countries revolving around child trafficking. And yeah, eventually kind of it's played out by a series of actors where he tells his story about how he left that job to eventually go and be a part of an operation where they were essentially saving hundreds of children. And then goes on to talk about how it's like a worldwide issue, how it's connected to, unfortunately, governments and all kinds of other really big companies and like businesses, and it's just a really big issue. And so although it's kind of a heavy topic, it's really interesting because the movie ended up premiering. It actually topped the more recent Indiana Jones that came out. And there's just so much talk about it. And I really feel like if you don't know, you should know. Originally, this was supposed to come out years ago. Apparently, some of the footage got bought by Disney, which is weird considering Disney is supposed to be a company that focuses on, you know, young families and children and theme parks and Mickey Mouse and cartoons. But they shelved it for years before ultimately a group of investors got involved, bought the footage, and then finally was able to put the movie together, but it has been delayed for years. Now, if you go on social media, you're not always going to see it, but some people are posting videos talking about sitting down to watch the movie. They're blaring the radio over the movie. Air conditioning units are being shut down. They're offering customers refunds. They're saying that they can't download the movie. It's just very weird, almost like they don't want people to see it. Anyway, go check it out for yourself. And if you can't get a ticket, there's plenty of businesses and things online, you know, that are promoting this, that want to help people get into theaters and see it. I say that because of the connection to Venus, which is about loving and nurturing and protecting, and Leo's connection to children. And the fact that it's going to be squaring both Jupiter and Uranus, showing where actually this is one of the highest paid transactions, illegal transactions in the world. These trafficking next to firearms and also drugs, unfortunately. And it's not limited to just, you know, sexual abuse and, you know, pedophilia. It has connections also to organ harvesting and a lot of other things. So without getting too graphic, please go and educate yourself because it's really important. And I do feel like some of these retrogrades aspects are going to bring a lot of this stuff out into the open. In regards to children also, I think we're going to hear a lot of information regarding birth rates because Leo is about birth, but the inconjunct to Pluto is about death. And there is lots of information starting to come out in independent media revolving around international statistics showing that there is major issues with death rates that are up and birth rates that are declining. And so something's not making sense. I wish that more people were aware of this because we've heard them, you know, be screaming and hollering about the death rates relating to COVID for the last 3 years. We should be more concerned about declining birth rates, fertility issues, and what's going on with these death numbers. I'm not speculating what it's connected to, but I do think that it's important that we are aware that we are not being given the open forum to question this, ask why it's going on, or follow up with this. There seems to be very little feedback that's coming from, you know, people who are supposed to be protecting the general public, and there's silence, and I wonder why that's going on. Kevin Spacey is wrapping up his trial currently. You're not hearing a lot about that, but that's taking place as we speak. There's been a number of accusers who have come forward to tell their stories about their sexual abuse in regards to the actor. Just recently, Elton John apparently appeared in court to speak on his behalf. Hollywood writers and actors are striking all over Hollywood, and likely I think we're going to see with this retrograde it is going to be extended clear into the fall. They're striking over issues basically connected to negotiations with major studios over streaming services that have failed. Among other demands, actors are striking for increased pay and rethinking residuals, which union members say has significantly diminished among the rise of streaming services. Residuals are financial compensation paid out to actors wherever TV shows and movies have appeared and are replayed. There's also concerns over pushing AI and them not potentially being compensated for AI and using their faces in movies in the future. Kind of spooky. Trump is facing indictment number 3 for events connected to the January 6th incident. As many of you guys may know, this has happened several times. There is also pending investigations going on relating to the connections with government affiliation with the January 6th riots. regardless of how you feel about Trump, you know, his degree on his ascendant is 29 degrees. So Venus is retrograding over his ascendant, which can be an indication of some significant change going on with his health or his public appearance. It'll be squaring off several times also, essentially with, you know, Jupiter and Uranus that's in his 10th house or conjunct his midheaven. And I do think that it is going to be a series of winding events that are going to play out with that retrograde, and he's very much going to be in the spotlight. BRICS nations are considering a gold-backed digital currency to push back against the US dollar and counter inflation. They will be previewing this apparently on August 22nd, 2023. But the question is how? How is that possible? How are they going to do that without getting rid of their standing debt? Is it likely that gold will sky high because of this? Is this why central banks are stocking up on gold? I guess we'll have to see. It is probably impossible for this to be something that is rolled out. When they say previewing, I don't know what that means. This has been speculation for some time that these nations were working together to be able to find a way to make their money maintain its value, which could potentially be very threatening for the US dollar, where we are no longer backed by US gold reserves. The stock market is screaming at a sky-high 52-week high. I would be looking to those Venus-Uranus squares for when you're going to see peaks and valleys, because likely that's when that's going to be taking place. Vogue says that metallics and chains are all the rage this summer for their summer style. And they want to pay homage to old Hollywood glamour, things like fine fabrics and dresses and fits that emphasize the female figure, also known as Venus. We are going to be seeing the Barbie movie, which is going to be coming out on July 21st, 2023, tomorrow. Did a little research into that after seeing Chris Brennan's post. He was talking about the transits that were very similar to the year that Barbie came out. The Barbie doll first was released on March the 9th, 1959. So Barbie is actually a sun in Pisces, a Venus in Aries. So she's got some spice. But we saw very similar transits actually the summer after Barbie was released. So in September of 1959, Venus went retrograde starting in Virgo, and it retrograded over the late degrees of Leo, very similar to how it is now. Now back then, a Barbie doll was selling for $3, obviously quite a deal compared to what you're going to pay to go and see the Barbie movie, because you know you're going to have to buy the Barbie and you're going to have to get your popcorn and your candy and all that stuff. But I like that it's paying homage to Barbie, and you know, the Barbie image being redefined, obviously for, you know, some time now, for decades. This is what we have kind of fashioned the female ideal figure after, and Barbie has gone through so many different changes and transformations and different varieties. I'm really excited actually to see what this means for the future of Barbie and introducing Barbie maybe to younger generations. Something that caught my eye just in like some of the Hollywood gossip, which is obviously the least important compared to the other topics I brought up. A lot of stuff going on. So I'm a big country fan. Okay, I live in Texas now, but I'm originally from Arizona. And so I heard a lot of like squabble on Twitter about Jason Aldean's new song called "Try That in a Small Town." A lot of people not so happy after the country music channel refused to play this video because they felt that it was making a ruckus and potentially not ideal for what they wanted people to be seeing on their channel. Call it what you want, but it's interesting because essentially the message is, you know, him standing up saying, you can do what you want to do, you can riot, you can have all these things going on, you know, in the cities, but we're not going to stand up for this. We're going to defend ourselves, and we're going to defend our families in smaller communities because that's where he comes from. So he's facing a lot of backlash, and less about the song, less about him, but more about the fact that he's taking a stand creatively using his words and using his lyrics to be able to better express himself and have pride for where he comes from. Taylor Swift becomes the first woman to have 4 albums on Billboard's top 100 at once. The superstar is the first living artist in nearly 60 years to have at least 4 albums at the same time on the top 10 on the Billboard chart. It's a combination of more recent albums that she's put out and also some of her re-recorded work that is just filling up the Billboard chart. Ariana Grande, Sofia Vergara, divorce reveals are out. So Sophia is splitting after 7 years from her partner. I guess he's from The Bachelor. And Ariana Grande is surfacing, returning back to the United States after announcing that she has been silently going through a divorce. These are all the ways that I'm starting to see Venus retrograde showing herself out in the world. I'd love to hear your guys' takes. What are you noticing in the midst of this Venus retrograde? Feel free to share this video with other people. Look at your own chart, see where Venus is retrograding. Come back. I'd love to hear your stories about how it's playing out for you. And I hope you guys like this content. I hope that you like, comment, share, and subscribe by interacting with the channel, giving me a thumbs up and saying hello. You guys allow this channel to continue to grow. Venus is going retrograde in my 11th house, so I'm going to be trying to be better about my shameless self-promotion, and it's going over my South Node, so I'm excited to see what happens. In closing, something else I wanted to show you guys. There was another chart that I'm remembering I wanted to bring up, so let me bring that up really quick. And this was just on a whim, okay? So I was looking into the US Dollar Coinage Act. So for those of you guys who live in the United States and you're questioning what's going on financially, this was April 2nd, 1792. Okay, it took place in the morning in Philadelphia. Apparently, this was the very day where they made a decision of the United States currency and how it correlates with gold and its value. So this is when I guess the original standard was set for what would eventually be like the US dollar. Okay, everything is based off of this. There's been some changes and some revisions, but this is the chart. The reason why I'm bringing this up is because the Venus retrograde itself is going back and forth over the second house where the moon and Uranus are. Second house, whole sign, third house. So where the media is influencing what's going on with money, where there's potentially going to be change revolving around money. And we also see that there are eclipses that are activating the planets in Aries, a south node, north node transit, so a reverse nodal return, and eclipses that have activated the Jupiter and Neptune point. So it's a Cancer rising chart, Sun in Aries, and Moon in Leo. But the Venus retrograde itself is going to be going back and forth over the whole sign, second house, hitting Uranus, which is unexpected sudden change relating to other people's resources, as well as the moon, which is the chart ruler. And Leo deals with gold. So I'm going to be looking at this chart. I might do a whole video on this at some point and kind of talk about what this means for the future of the U.S. Reserve and, for the U.S. currency. The Reserve is the one's causing some problems, but for the currency, and then also talk to you guys about where some of these eclipses that are going to be coming in the fall are going to play out. Eventually, though, I do believe with Saturn coming into conjunction with Venus and this retrograde, also with other transiting squares, I do feel like we're definitely going to be seeing some major fluctuations to that, and ultimately realizing that maybe we've done ourselves a bit of disservice by not being backed by gold. So we'll see. I don't know. I'm not a financial advisor, but I'm just putting that out there. If this is something also that you guys would like to look at, if you're like an astrology enthusiast, I would definitely take a look, especially knowing that we're going to see so much South Node action here, and we are also going to be seeing eclipses that are activating this. Yeah, it makes me feel like we're in for a bit of a wild ride. So let me know also if you have an interest in seeing a video on this chart. Okay, so with that being said, I'll let you guys go. Enjoy your Thursday with the Moon-Venus conjunction. Wishing everybody a positive ride with this Venus retrograde, and I will see all of you guys here tomorrow when I do live readings on the channel. If you guys want to stop by, 7 o'clock p.m. Pacific time, and 5 o'clock p.m. Pacific time, 8 p.m. Eastern. We're going to be doing a tarot reading, so join me if you want to hang out on Friday night. All right, until next time, I'll see all of you guys very soon. Take care.